this week. And with us is Christopher Dickey of Newsweek and the Daily Beast. We also have with us Ana Navarro Pedro of Visão, the Portuguese newsweekly magazine, Simon Cooper of the Financial Times, and Paul Taylor of Reuters, the news agency. The German Chancellor had another full week. It started in Brussels, where 24 of her 26 counterparts approved new rules to tighten economic governance of Europe. And it concluded in China, where her hosts committed, at least in theory, to help boost that emergency fund for European states in distress. More than 3 decades after former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger asked, "Who do I call if I want to call Europe?" Does he now have his answer, Paul Taylor?
Jawohl. I think so. I mean, there's been no doubt this has been the week. In fact, it really began the week before when she was the keynote speaker at the Davos World Economic Forum. And that was another sign of her ascendancy in the way in which she has become Europe's indispensable leader. And
you've been to Davos's before.
Yes.
And did it really seem clear to you that she was the woman?
This time she was front and center, and the French were nowhere. They've got an election campaign. They had other things to do, maybe. The Chinese didn't come because it was Chinese New Year and the Year of the Dragon. And the Americans didn't come because I'm told they've got an election too. So it was Angela Merkel who was really the dominant personality, along with some of the leaders from the Arab Spring. Then on Monday, as you said, she essentially cemented her ascendancy in Europe by having everybody else sign up to the German rules of the game, which is hair shirt austerity with sanctions for those who don't get their deficits down and their debts down. And then the news came that she was going to come and campaign in France on behalf of Nicolas Sarkozy. And that, again, was a sign of the extent to which she really, rules the roost in Europe. And obviously, things must be getting quite desperate if she feels that she needs to come here and try and save her ally in his election campaign, in which he's fallen further behind in the opinion polls in the last couple of weeks. But it's Germany is being looked to for leadership. It's being looked at with envy, with resentment. Whether the Germans are yet ready for all of this, I'm not sure. They are very reluctant hegemons, I think, now. They've learned their historical lessons. They would much rather not be quite so much in the limelight, but because it's their taxpayers' money, as they see it, which is first and foremost on the line, they are the ones who are feeling increasingly they have to call the shots and keep Europe on their track.
Well, Christopher Dickey, do you also have the sense that Angela Merkel's a reluctant hegemon, as Paul Taylor put it?
Well, yes, I think she's reluctant for all the reasons that Paul suggested, and also because she doesn't want to put her money where her mouth is too much. I mean, the big question at Davos, and I think the big question in a lot of financial circles, is not whether austerity is a good idea, but how you can encourage growth and whether there should be some sort of firewall to protect Europe against rampant speculation, which does happen every so often, as we've seen. And the Germans are just not on board for that. They just don't want to pony up that much money, because what you need, what the French said, what the IMF is saying, is you need an enormous firewall. You need a commitment of well over $1 trillion euros, and nobody in Germany really wants to go for that, especially not Merkel.
It's been a strange week because Merkel's been alone at the center. The stock markets have risen at the start of the year. You have the feeling that things like the fact that there hasn't been a Greek debt deal worked out are just being shifted aside, and people are just kind of like don't want to go there.
Yeah, there's some animal spirits rising. I mean, today there was a very strong US jobs report, much stronger than people had expected. And generally, economic data out of the US has been surprisingly strong the last few months. Unemployment's now down to 8.3%, which in these times is good. And yes, at the moment, the talk of attacks on the weaker peripheral countries, Greece, Portugal, Italy, is on the wane, but it will come back. I mean, as Anna knows much better than me, there's very strong talk of Portugal defaulting, Portugal going the Greek route. So we will be back there soon.
And your newspaper giving rave reviews this Friday to Portugal's handling of the situation, by the way.
Yes, so far. But as we know, austerity is plunging several countries into recession. and if you're in recession, it's very, very hard to keep your debt down.
All right. I just want to get back to the point with you, Anna Navarro, the point that Paul made. On Monday, Merkel and Sarkozy, next Monday, will take part in a joint interview with French and German public television, a further chance for Sarkozy to repeat a word he used an awful lot last Sunday when he announced major economic reforms.
Je prends l'exemple de l'Allemagne. En Allemagne, nos amis allemands, en Allemagne, l'Allemagne. Est-ce que franchement vous pensez que c'est pas mon rôle?
The German model touted as Sarkozy unveiled painful measures to make France's economy more competitive. They include raising the sales tax to 21.2%. This led less than 3 months ahead of his re-election bid. What do you think of that pitch?
Isn't this going to be wonderful on Monday, seeing Frau Merkel in France campaigning for Sarkozy? That is going to be such a sight. Wow, boy. Yeah, if I got it right, Frau Merkel in Davos, she was not the first choice. She was not even second best. She was maybe third best after French, American, Chinese have defected.
No, these are people who've dominated previous years, is what all I was saying. This year was her
from
year.
the underdog's point of view, standing behind Portugal. There's a newspaper this week that portrayed Merkel saying that Germany is going to occupy Portugal after having occupied Greece. This is very resentful and this is very strong, but it portrays exactly what some part of Europe is feeling towards Germany right now. Now, is Germany willing to play the role of leadership? Of course it is. They don't want to pay for it, and I am the first one to understand the German taxpayer. But they want to play the leadership role. Of course, that's exactly what she's doing. Who mandated Mrs. Merkel to go to China and ask money for the Chinese? No one, as far as I know. So why did she go there on her own? Of course, she's giving orders to the rest of Europe. And of course, Germany did not learn the lesson from history because the Germans are being so despiteful to peoples in Europe like Portugal, Portuguese people, like the Greek ones, saying things that are really hurting, and they are making all this resentment coming up. When they say that Portugal is a country where people don't work, they work less than in Germany, that they have much more holidays. If you come and do the countdown, you see it's wrong. It's the other way around. Germany has more holidays and works less hours than we do, but they work better. That is for sure. When they say that Greek and Portugal and Ireland and Italy are like a drunkard, an alcoholic that says, please, another glass of wine before I stop drinking, and this is the comparison. I mean, what are they expecting? They are creating really...
In fairness, that's not from her mouth.
It's not from her mouth, it's from Germany, and I'm saying Germany did not learn the lesson from history. So they are a colossal country in this small continent, and this has been the historical problem of Germany ever since it was created. And it's still... The German question is still now very much present in politics in the 21st century. And I do think, as you do, that the fact that they want to lead, yes, they are leading and they want to lead and have a German Europe and not putting the money on the table for that, I think it's going to lead us to that end.
It seems as though it's not just Portugal where a lot of people feel that way. And there's a lot of reaction in this country last week when a senior member of Merkel's CDU revealed that the Chancellor herself, as Paul was mentioning, would campaign for Nicolas Sarkozy come election time, thus drawing fire from the opposition.
First time a German leader tells us that Mrs. Merkel will come and support Nicolas Sarkozy, who hasn't even said he'll be a candidate in France. Maybe that's why all he ever talks about is Germany.
Again, Christopher Dickey, is it smart to tout the fact that you've got Germany's backing and that you want the French to act more like the Germans?
You know, I think Sarkozy's really at his wit's end. I mean, I think nothing he does makes things better. Why not try this? This way, at least it looks like he's part of a united leadership of Europe. I think his idea is that by standing next to Merkel, it's we're leading Europe together. That's the image that he wants to portray. Problem is that I think most Europeans and really most people in France don't believe that. They believe that, in fact, Merkel is the person in charge here, that Germany's got the money, and that Sarkozy is sort of running along behind her. And that's not a good image for a politician.
Simon Cooper, how do you explain this strategy by the French president?
I wonder if it came from him or whether he was very irked to hear it from the German side. It might have been a Merkelian idea rather than a Sarkozyan one. Well,
the Germans say that it's him and his party who were keen to get her involved, and his strategy does seem to be essentially to dramatize the crisis, to say the crisis is so terrible that you have to have an experienced leader, play on the inexperience in government of François Hollande, you know, nice guy, but would you want him at the controls with the situation this desperate, and play up the Franco-German alliance, which historically is something that's been seen in the last 30-40 years as positive both on the left and on the right. But in this instance, I think that the risk that Nicolas Sarkozy takes is that he draws attention to the increasing inequality of the Franco-German relationship, and the fact that on his watch in the last 5 years, France has, to some extent, been downgraded both economically and politically in relation to Germany, and that was highlighted, as it were, when France lost its AAA credit rating last month.
And getting back to what Anna was alluding to, the sentiment in Portugal, echoing the sentiment in Greece. Again, this all coming in the context of lenders returning to Athens this Friday. The locals, though, seem to have a lot to say about Germany's weight in all of this.
I've often said that we need to have a more European Germany and a less Germanic Europe.
Ana Navarro-Pedro, when you see the way this is going, what do you think about the way that it'll now go forth if the Franco-German couple is becoming unhinged and Germany is the sole player in the spotlight?
We're having elections in France. Germany is having elections next year. Mercosur, which has become an entity in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, Mercosur may not exist anymore. So let's wait and see. But the fact also that the French president, the French government is always showing Germany as the example to follow. Yes, there was a basis in the beginning. There was this idea that we might go to a federal Europe, you know, with the France and Germany being almost one entity that would rule all over Europe. We saw that went down. But at one point they were talking about, not merging, but harmonizing social system, the not institutions, but social policy, working salaries, social security, and so forth, because they thought that would be ideal in order to have this duo ruling Europe. We saw, in fact, that didn't have any legs to go any farther than from just, a thought on the table. But also, when the French politicians now, on a very opportunistic way, are saying France should imitate Germany. Let's see, Germany has lots of problems as well. I mean, people who are working for very low salaries are having lots of problems. They are getting a lot of federal help, or the states, the lenders' help as well. We are seeing the streets and the presence, of the state or of the lenders really pulling back from, public space, like streets going run down, like dispensaries, medical dispensaries with less staff and, overworked. We're seeing huge problems in schools. We are seeing that people who have to retire at 65 or 68 are actually being paid by the state to have a technical, how do you say in English, formation? Training, in order to disguise the fact that enterprises are not giving jobs to them, and so they are being paid by the state. All this is not being told in France, and we're just seeing, the nice sketch, and we are not seeing the shadows.
Okay, well, we'll continue to follow this story. Before we go, how can investors believe that a startup run by a cocky 27-year-old is more valuable than Boeing? Are they nuts? Those are the words of The Economist this week, the magazine, in its cover story, asking that question after Facebook's initial foray into the stock market put its value somewhere between 75 and 100 billion US dollars. which is a huge sum of money, much more, Christopher Dickey, than when Google entered the market or Apple. Do investors know what they're doing?
No. No, I don't think they do know what they're doing. I mean, I think it is vastly overvalued. And I have one word for investors in Facebook: MySpace. Remember MySpace? Mm-hmm. What happened to MySpace? I think these things come and go very quickly, and I personally am not prepared to believe that Facebook is an enduring phenomenon. I think it's a phenomenon of the moment. Mm-hmm. And I will be absolutely amazed if the valuation of Facebook 5 years from now is in any way commensurate with the valuation that exists right now, but I defer to the Financial Times on this.
Our personal data for each user, according to the sums that they're talking about, is worth $125.
I mean, our newspaper, John Gapper, also says, why? What's the point of this flotation? Because they don't need money, because running Facebook's quite cheap, because the users supply all the data. And the investors won't get any vote, any effective vote, because Zuckerberg controls the majority of the shares. And so the only point for this flotation is A, to raise money to pay the taxes that come with floating, and B, to reward the employees and the initial investors who like to get out. Well, you know, greed makes capitalism work. Don't knock greed.
Greed is good.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for this week. I want to thank you, Simon Cooper, Christopher Dickey, Ana Navarro-Pedro, and Paul Taylor. And thank you for being with us here for The World This Week. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for Business with Marcus Carlson.